Hey there YouTube, this is the Phantom Outlaw. Got another firearms review coming to you today, and as you can see in front of you and from the title, this is the Springfield Armory XDs 45 caliber 4.0. Wow, that's a mouthful. So what exactly does that mean? Alright, so this is not exactly a new gun. It's been out for a year and a half or so. It is from Springfield Armory, 45 caliber as I said. The 4.0 refers to the barrel size or the length of the firearm. There is also a 3.3. That one's been out a little bit longer. That was the original version of this gun for both 9mm and 45. And then about a little over a year and a half, I guess about a year and a half ago, the 4.0 came out. It is my opinion, and probably several other people as well, that the difference in length is not as important for 9mm as it is for 45. And what I mean by that is recoil, felt recoil for sure, and muzzle flip. 9mm is a relatively tame caliber. I'm not saying there isn't any recoil, because certainly there is, but it's relatively mild compared to the 45. The difference from a 3.3 inch barrel to a 4.0 in the 45 is a more significant difference than it is for the 9mm. I've shot probably 2 magazines, maybe 3, from a 3.3 45 caliber Springfield XDs. I wasn't real crazy about it. Then I came across a 4.0. I got a pretty good deal on it, real good deal actually. I decided to go ahead and grab it, and comparing the two, now there were several months in between, but as best as I could remember, it was a fairly significant difference. I'm much happier with the 4.0 than with the 3.3. Alright, so that being said, let's talk about a few of the different things, and as normal, I'm going to go over the specs first, and then we're going to talk about a few of the differences in terms of pros and cons. Alright, so obviously, as I've said a few times, this is a 45 ACP caliber. The height of the firearm is between 4.4 inches to 5 inches, or actually slightly over 5, and I'll get to that in a moment, depending on which magazine you have in it. The length is 7 inches. The weight is between 23.5 and almost 25 ounces. The difference in the weight also has to do with the magazine. These are empty weights, by the way. Sights. We have a 3-dot sights. The front sights, which is pretty slick on, we'll get to that here in just a moment, is a red fiber optic front sight, and then the steel dovetail rear sights. The width is 0.9 inches, so not even a full inch wide, which is very nice. It is a single stack design, which will impact the magazine capacity, but we'll get to that here in a moment as well. The frame is a black polymer frame. Magazine capacity. Alright, here's where it gets kind of interesting. As you see in front of you here, there are 3 different choices for magazines. 5, 6, and 7 round magazines. Now, it only comes with 2. It comes with the 5 and the 7 round, I believe. I'm trying to remember now. And the third one I got aftermarket. All of them are made by Springfield. So you've got a choice of 5, 6, or 7, and I've made another modification on the 1, which I'll show you here in just a moment as well. The barrel length is 4 inches, as we've already talked about. That is a hammer-forged steel melanite barrel with a 1 in 16 twist rate. Another mouthful for you. The action on this firearm is a striker fire, and the trigger weight is right at 7, maybe 7.1 pounds. So there's the basic information that we wanted to talk about on this. Now, let's go back here real quickly to the magazines. I mentioned there are 3 different magazines that we're looking at here. This one here is the 5-round magazine, and you're going to see this base plate that I've got aftermarket to put on it, which allows this little pinky extension right here. When you're holding the gun, it really helps to get a better grip on the gun, and while it doesn't stick out as far in the back, makes it a little bit easier to conceal. So this is the 5-round magazine. This is the 6-round magazine, and then of course the 7-round magazine. What I was talking about a minute ago with the 5-round magazine in, well, no magazine, we have an empty safe gun. With the 5-round magazine in, you still have a spot on the bottom here for the pinky, so you have a fair amount of control, whereas without that, your pinky is kind of left on the bottom here without a home. So that's something that I added. It did not come with this, but I did add it on. I do like it that way. Put the 6-round magazine in, you definitely have a home on the bottom for your pinky. Very comfortable. And then of course with the 7-round magazine, more room yet. Now, When you have the 7-round in, I think because of the longer slide on this one and the longer grip here, this makes it look like a more normal firearm, for lack of a better term. I've had some different customers talk about how with the 5-round magazine in and the longer slide, how it just looks odd or out of place or not quite right. I understand that. You put the longer magazines in, be it the 6 or the 7-round, and you're going to get a more normal looking firearm. That's just for your own personal opinion, for 2 cents, whatever it's worth, whatever you're happy with. We did talk about the slide here for, the sights. You'll see here on the front sight, I'm not sure what you can see, that is a red fiber optic front sight. And then we've got the 2-dot rear sight. Red fiber optic sight is a nice plus. Sometimes people do get confused when it comes to a fiber optic sight that it means that there is some type of a power source or a laser or something along those lines in it, and then they get frustrated when in a low light or no light situation that bright red light on the end of their firearm is no longer there. Obviously it needs a light source. So red fiber optic or green fiber optic, whatever fiber optic color choice you have, does need a light source. Without a light source, it's just a regular front sight. Nice feature on it nonetheless. All right, now let's talk about a couple of the pros and cons. Pros: it is a slim single stack magazine. We spoke a little bit ago about that it is a single stack, so it is not a high capacity magazine. We've already referenced the capacity on it, but the fact that it is a slim single stack magazine makes it very easy to conceal. That extra 0.7 inches on the length of it really doesn't impact much, because that's going, depending on how you carry it, that's going down in either inside your pants or holster or outside through the holster, whatever the case is. So it's this dimension here that you're more concerned with in terms of concealment. So having the shorter magazine in means you lose this portion off the bottom of it, which makes it an easier firearm to conceal. Now, what you can't see on this, at least not very easily because of the way I have it set up, this does have a very aggressive grip texture. I have the Talon Grips rubberized grip on it. I'll get to that here in a moment. But it does have a very aggressive grip texture, which I consider both a pro and a con, depending on your perspective. We'll get to that a little bit more in the con in a moment. Because of the grip tape, you cannot see, but right here on the firearm, there is a back strap that you can replace. It comes with that one and one other one, so you have a choice of 2 different sizes. You also get, for the magazines, the little sleeve that comes with the magazine also comes in both sizes, so it is a flush fit on the back of the firearm either way you go. But the fact that it does have 2 size options is definitely a pro. It does have a rail on the front here, so if you choose to add a light or a laser or any other type of accessory on the front that attaches via the Picatinny style rail, it does have the rail. Another feature about this firearm, which I think most people are already familiar with, but if not, let me show it to you here. If you're familiar with the 1911, you're familiar with the grip safety. When you hold the gun correctly, just by holding it right underneath here, you're going to have the grip safety is automatically depressed. If you were to try to hold the gun this way and fire it somehow, it would not work. The grip safety must be depressed. Again, just like a 1911 style. So that's an external grip safety that is a pro that a lot of people are not familiar with, if they're not familiar with the 1911 style, but it is a nice feature that this firearm comes with. The magazine release, which is tough to see, but we've got it on both sides. It's ambi mag release. You can push it from either side right out of the box. You don't have to switch anything. So if you are a left-handed shooter, this already comes with a ambidextrous magazine release. No such luck for the slide release. It's still on the other side for most of us right-handed shooters out there. But the magazine release is ambi. It does have a loaded chamber indicator on the top of the firearm, which is going to be right here. When it's loaded, you're going to have this little indicator will be just slightly raised. You'll be able to see it and feel it if there's a low light situation. Alright, so that's the pros we want to talk about. I'm going to go back and try to show you what I've got here. Is I've got the rubber Talon Grips tape on it. The reason I did that is not because of the rough texture that's underneath it. You can sort of see a little bit of that right here. The reason that I went with the rubberized grip is because this is a .45 caliber firearm, which means there's going to be a lot of kick with this. When I'm holding this firearm with that rubberized grip on, I get just a little bit better purchase. So as I'm getting that muzzle flip or the recoil, it's more to hold on to. It's just a little bit softer, a little bit more comfortable feel for me. That's a personal preference. I'm not saying that you should have to go with that or need to go with that. That is just the way that I went with it. All right, so those are the pros. There's probably several more out there that other people may be aware of. Those are the ones that I've observed. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the cons. All right, this is heavy for its size, and there's a reason for that. It's a .45 caliber firearm, so it's got to be pretty stout. But when you compare it to other firearms, like the M&P Shield, this is about 4.5 ounces heavier than the Shield. It's about 6 ounces heavier than the Glock 43. If you take out the extended magazines and go with the flush magazines, it's about the same size. Or all three of those are very, very much the same size. So it is a heavier firearm. Of course, the Glock 43 and the M&P Shield are not .45 caliber. This same firearm in 9mm is actually a little bit heavier because there's more metal in the barrel, because there's less, obviously, metal. For the 45, there's less content to the barrel because it's a larger caliber. 9mm, it's a thicker barrel because it's a smaller caliber. I get it. The 45 came out first for the XDS. The 9mm version came along a year and a half or so later. They had already designed the heavier slide, the more robust design of it to accommodate the 45 caliber. They didn't change it. So if you get the 9mm version of this, it's going to be significantly heavier than the comparable competition models. But that does help to reduce recoil. So I guess it's a plus depending on your perspective in terms of additional carry weight. I mentioned a moment ago the aggressive grip texture. Some people consider that a pro, some people consider that a con. If you are someone who prefers a smoother grip texture without any type of a tape or cover on this, you may not like that aggressive texture. I have also heard people comment that with the 45 and the aggressive grip, after 50 or 60 rounds at the range, that it's rubbing on their hand, or it aggravates their hand, or there's additional discomfort. Before I put the tape on it, I shot probably 300 rounds through this firearm in 2 different settings, 2 different shooting times, and I did not experience that at all. But again, I'm not new to shooting, so maybe that's part of it. Again, I put the tape on there because it gives me just a little bit better grip as far as comfort goes that I can squeeze into. But again, some people may consider that aggressive grip texture a bit of a con. There was a recall for the original XDS, the 3.3. So there's a recall history with this firearm, but that recall happened before the 4.0 came out. So the 4.0, this version, came out already corrected. There's no issue with this one whatsoever. So there is not a recall with this particular version, but with the original version there was the recall. Springfield did a fairly decent job taking care of that. I know it took some time for a lot of folks, but they were able to take care of everybody who did submit their firearms to be corrected under the recall. So if that's in the back of your mind, it's legitimate, but it does not apply to this particular version. All right, so this is a 45 ACP. For those of you that aren't familiar with what a 45 ACP looks like, it's a large bullet, obviously bigger than a 9mm or a 40 caliber. Because of that, you're going to have recoil. There's nothing you can do about recoil with a 45 other than go with a much larger gun. I'll give you an example of that. A 1911. This is a significantly larger firearm, much harder to conceal, much, much heavier than the XDS. This is a relatively tame and mild recoil for a 45. This one, not so much. Again, you should not be surprised by that going into this, because if you're familiar with firearms, you understand that weight and size directly impact the felt recoil. Alright, a couple other things to talk about here in terms of pros and cons. This is kind of combined here. When this firearm first came out, it was still included with what XD has been sending their what Springfield has been sending their XD line out. They have this full kit. It's a very nice, large plastic case. Inside that case, you've got the firearm, you've got 2 magazines, you've got 2 back straps, 2 sleeves for the magazines, you've got a holster for the firearm, a holster for 2 magazines, you've got a speed loader. Because of that additional content, obviously the price is going to be higher. It is my opinion that Springfield was a little slow to react over the last couple of years to the competition outselling Springfield, at least in my experiences. And I don't know the exact numbers, but that's not the point here, because their products, although the same quality as, say, the Smith & Wesson M&P line or the Glock line, even Ruger if you want to throw them into the mix, The Springfield line was about $150 to $170 more expensive, and you weren't getting more of a firearm for that. So Springfield did react earlier this year, this spring, 2015, and they came out with what they call the Essential Kit. The Essential Kit is the exact same firearm with the same magazines, the same backstrap, the same sleeves for the magazines, and it's just a basic plastic case or box, minus the big fancy case, the holster, the magazine holster, and the speed loader. By eliminating all those extras, they were able to chop $120 to $140 off the cost of the firearm. Again, the firearm is the identical firearm. It's what comes with it that was changed to offer a more affordable price. That brings this firearm much closer to line with the Shields and the Glock 43s and other firearms in that same size, which I think, or if you want to talk about some of the other models, those models are much closer in price points to their competition as well. So Springfield did a good job. I think they were just a little bit late in responding to that. It's been my experience from talking to many people that had the full kit from Springfield, that in most, if not all, well, not all cases, but in most cases, what was happening with all those fancy accessories is the holster and the magazine holster was staying in that big fancy case that was stuck in the bottom of the closet, never to see the light of day again. So people were paying for it because it was the only option and never using it. They were pretty basic holsters. The case, very nice, but it just had to be much bigger to accommodate all of the extras. So by eliminating all of that, the price point came down into line. So I consider that probably a con initially, because people got turned off by a lot of the Springfields because of the high price points. But give them credit, it's now a pro because you have two choices. You can go with the Essential Kit or the full-blown kit. The Essential Kit is the smaller, lighter, less fancy, much more affordable option. Alright, so that's the issues as far as pros and cons. Overall, as far as a firearm, you're slinging a 45 ACP downrange. That's a much bigger bullet, a much more of a man stopper. Sometimes people refer to that. Some people prefer the 45 over the 9mm and the 40 caliber. Personal preference. You've heard me talk before. I do carry the Shield as my everyday carry gun. I have also carried this a number of times. I like both. They're about the same size. This one is heavier. You get a good holster, and if you're wearing it right, you really don't notice a big difference in weight. If it's a good holster, it's going to fit you right, and the weight is more insignificant. I definitely recommend this firearm. As far as accuracy goes, it is a 4-inch barrel. That should be a slight improvement over the 3.3-inch barrel, but as I said before, it really comes down to the shooter. If you're only used to shooting 380 or 22 or maybe 9mm, and you suddenly step up to a 45, and this is your first experience with a 45, you're probably not going to have a whole lot of immediate success. It's going to take some getting used to. If you've already shot 45 in some other size or format, and you're familiar with the recoil, you're familiar with that big boom and that big hunk of lead going down range, this is an easier transition for you. Again, I'm not here to get into the debate or even try to answer the debate of which caliber is the right caliber, because the answer really is whichever one works best for you. 9, 40, 45, they're all very capable. There's advantages and disadvantages to each. It's a matter of personal preference. This is a good solid choice. If you're looking to carry a 45 and you're looking for a slim single stack type firearm, this could be the one for you. Whether it's the 3.3 inch or the 4.0, that's up to you. I like the 4.0 in 45 because it does help to reduce the recoil. It makes it a more manageable shooter, in my opinion. So definitely a big plus on the Springfield XDs 45 4.0. If you've got any questions, let me know down below in the comments, and I'll get back to you as quickly as possible. I hope you're all doing great. Take care.